I used to believe that love meant endurance, that the ones you loved most could break you, and you'd still stay because family was supposed to be forever. But forever, I learned, is a long time to be invisible. The day I collapsed at work, my body gave out long before my heart did. They said it was exhaustion, dehydration, overwork, stress, words that sound small next to the ache that had been building for years. When I woke up in that white room, tubes in my arm, machines beeping softly, the first thing I asked the nurse was, "Did my parents come?" She hesitated. That half-second pause told me more than any word could. "They were informed," she said quietly. "No one's arrived yet." For 2 days I waited. The doctors called again, twice. Still no one came. On the third morning, I asked for my phone. My hands were trembling, not from weakness, but from something deeper. The screen lit up. Notifications, messages, tags, and there it was, the picture. My family, smiling, standing together at a park I knew well. The caption read, "Family Day without the drama." It burned deeper than the IV in my arm. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just stared at that picture until my eyes blurred. Because in that moment, I realized something. Maybe I wasn't their family anymore. Maybe I was just their fallback. The one who paid, fixed, rescued. And when I finally broke, they replaced me with peace and a filter. I used to work at Green Tech Solutions, a company where ambition never slept. I was the dependable one, the one who stayed late, who double-checked everyone's work, who filled in when others faltered. Reliable Ava, they called me. Always reliable, never remarkable. But what no one knew was that my reliability wasn't pride. It was survival. Every extra hour I worked wasn't for promotion, it was for home. Dad had been out of work since the housing crash. He called it early retirement. Mom called it a rough patch. Either way, the bills didn't care. Then there was Marissa, my older sister, an influencer. Always smiling online, always preaching self-care and manifestation energy. She had podcasts, candle lines, clothing collabs. None lasted, but I always covered the gaps, quietly. And Peyton, the youngest, the peacekeeper. Sweet, soft-spoken, always avoiding fights. She borrowed quietly too, and forgot loudly. Every month I kept us all afloat. Rent, insurance, groceries. Every thank you was another promise that next month would be different. It never was. We looked perfect online. Family photos, matching outfits, captions like, "Love is everything." But behind those smiles were credit card bills with my name on them. And I believed that love meant fixing things, until I realized I was the only one bleeding for it. Grandpa Joe used to warn me. He'd been an accountant. Numbers were his language. "You can't audit love, Ava," he'd say. "But you'll know when the numbers stop adding up." He'd noticed what I refused to see. That my parents didn't see me as their daughter anymore. They saw me as their plan B. He was the only one who saw my exhaustion. The only one who looked past the smile. When he passed away, the house felt emptier. Not because he was gone, but because the truth he'd carried was too. The night before my collapse, I stayed late again. The fluorescent lights hummed. My chest was tight. Emails blurred together. Marissa texted, "Hey sis, can you cover rent again? Promise I'll pay you back next week." I typed, deleted, typed again. "Sure." That was the last message I ever sent before the floor disappeared beneath me. When I woke up in the hospital, the first face I saw wasn't my family. It was Dr. Hayes, my attending physician, kind, soft-spoken, with tired eyes that had seen too many burnt-out souls. "You've been under extreme stress," he said gently. "Your body's been running on fumes." He hesitated before adding, "Do you have anyone we can call? Any emergency contact?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say my family, but the word got stuck somewhere between my heart and my throat. So I said no. 3 days passed. No visits, no calls, just the sound of machines keeping rhythm with the silence. On the 4th day, 74 missed calls appeared on my phone, all from home. And one message from Dad. "We need you." Not "Are you okay?" Not "We're sorry." Just "We need you." That's when everything changed. Just not the way they expected. When I left the hospital, the world looked different. Not brighter, not darker, just quieter. The air outside felt like a stranger, cold but honest. I stood there with my hospital bag, my discharge papers, and a silence I didn't know what to do with. For years, my life had been filled with noise, requests, reminders, emergencies. Now there was nothing. I called for a cab and went home, to the same house I'd been paying for. When I walked through the door, Mom was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Dad was watching TV. Marissa was taking a selfie. No one looked up right away. Then Mom smiled too brightly. There she is, our hero. Feeling better, honey? I stood there, my body still aching, watching how perfectly rehearsed her tone was. Marissa added, "You scared us, Ava. We were just talking about how lucky we are you're okay." I wanted to scream. You were at a park while I was hooked to machines. You were smiling while I couldn't even breathe. But I didn't say it. Not yet. Instead, I nodded. Yeah, lucky. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. The house filled with the hum of comfort I'd built and paid for. Every bill, every repair, every convenience traced back to me. For the first time, I started wondering what my life would look like if I stopped saving everyone else. The thought terrified me, but it also felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. A week later, I got a letter. It wasn't from work. It was from Grandpa Joe's attorney. The letter said, "Per the request of the late Joseph Miller, you are the sole beneficiary of his personal savings and estate." My heart stopped. I hadn't even known he'd left me anything. When I met with the lawyer, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Grandpa. "Ava, this isn't payment. It's permission. Use this to build a life that's yours, not theirs." I cried for the first time in months. Because for once, someone wasn't asking. Someone was giving, to me. With Grandpa's savings, I made a quiet plan. No big moves, no announcements, just small, quiet exits. I paid off my own debts. I opened a separate account. I started therapy. Dr. Hayes had recommended a counselor, Mara, who specialized in burnout and emotional boundaries. In our first session, she asked, "Who takes care of you, Ava?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "No one." She nodded softly. "Then it's time to change that." I started with little boundaries. When Marissa texted for money, I said, "I can't this time." When Mom hinted about the mortgage, "You'll have to figure it out, Mom." It felt brutal, but also like sunlight touching a part of me that had forgotten warmth. They didn't take it well. Mom cried. Dad shouted about family obligations. Marissa called me selfish. And Peyton just said, "They're scared, Ava. You were the glue. Now they don't know how to stand without you," I said quietly. "Then maybe it's time they learn." Meanwhile, work was different. Green Tech had offered me time off, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't want to go back to the same desk that drained me, so I resigned. No grand speech, no dramatic exit, just a calm one-line email. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'm choosing a new path." I remember walking out of that building for the last time, sunlight on my face. No paycheck waiting, no backup plan. Just freedom, raw and uncertain. For the first time, I started painting again. It had been years since I'd touched a brush, but every color felt like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. Mara told me to find what healed me, not what impressed others. So I painted my pain, the hospital, the silence, the park photo that had broken something in me. When I posted one of my paintings online, titled "Family Day Without the Drama," people didn't just like it, they felt it. Comments flooded in. "This hit too close to home. I see myself in this. Thank you for saying what I never could." My story, the one my family hid, started resonating with strangers. And slowly a new kind of family began forming, one built on truth, not appearance. Then came the day everything changed again. It was a Sunday morning. Mom called, crying. Dad had been served foreclosure papers. Apparently, they hadn't been paying the mortgage since I stopped helping. The house, the one I'd carried for years, was falling apart. I listened quietly as she begged, "Ava, please, we need your help. We'll lose everything." There it was again, that phrase. "We need you." I thought about the hospital room, the park photo, the silence. Then I said something I never thought I could. "Mom, you already did." And I hung up. That night, I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. Because for the first time, I understood. Helping people who refuse to help themselves isn't love. It's surrender. Weeks passed. The house was sold. Marissa's online empire began to crumble. Truth has a way of slipping through filters. Someone had sent her followers screenshots of her messages asking me for money. Her perfect image cracked overnight, and I didn't send them. Life did. Peyton moved out on her own, took a job, and texted me one night. "I'm sorry for staying quiet when you needed me. I'm learning now." I smiled. Maybe redemption was possible, not for all, but for some. Months later, I opened a small art studio. Simple, peaceful, full of light. I called it Second Sun. People came not just to buy paintings, but to share stories of betrayal, burnout, survival. It became more than art. It became healing. One afternoon, a woman asked, "Do you ever wish your family would apologize?" I paused, then said softly, "No, I just wish I'd stopped waiting sooner." And yet, life has a strange sense of symmetry. A year after my collapse, I got a message request from Marissa. It read, "I saw your story online. I didn't know how much I hurt you. I'm sorry, Ava." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed, "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back." Because forgiveness, I learned, doesn't mean reunion. It means release. Now, when I look at that old park photo, the one that broke me, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel distance and peace. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the ones who share your truth. And as I stand in my studio, surrounded by colors I once forgot how to see, I realize Grandpa Joe was right all along. You can't audit love, but you'll know when the numbers finally add up. It's strange how healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with music or fireworks. It just appears one morning, quiet and certain, like sunlight through curtains. That's how I felt 1 year later. No anger left, no grief, just peace. I'd built something real. My studio, Second Sun, had become more than a business. It was a sanctuary. People came not just to buy art, but to find themselves in it. One woman told me, "Your paintings don't just show pain, they show what comes after." And that's what I'd always wanted. To show that after the collapse, there can still be light. One afternoon, I was cleaning brushes when I heard a soft knock on the door. When I opened it, there they were. Mom, Dad, and Marissa. They looked smaller somehow, not physically, just diminished. The kind of small that comes when pride finally runs out. Mom's voice trembled. "Ava, we didn't know where else to go." For a second, the old instinct to fix, to comfort, tried to rise. But I stayed still. Dad spoke next. "We lost the house. Marissa's brand is gone. We don't know what to do." Marissa's eyes were red. She whispered, "I miss you." And for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. Not as monsters, but as broken people who had used me to avoid their own reflection. I stepped aside and said, "You can come in." They did. We sat together in silence for a while. Mom finally said, "We're sorry, Ava, for everything." I nodded. "I know." She reached for my hand. "Can we start over?" I looked at her, really looked, and gently I said, "We can start over separately." Because sometimes love doesn't need reunion. It needs release. They cried. So did I. But it wasn't like before. This time the tears weren't about guilt or obligation. They were about goodbye. After they left, I walked to the back of the studio, to the wall where I kept my first painting, the one titled Family Day Without the Drama. I took it down, not to erase the past, but to make space for something new. In its place, I hung a new piece, soft colors, sunrise tones, nothing harsh. I called it Second Sun, because sometimes life gives you another dawn, after you've learned to stop chasing the night. Months passed. The studio grew. People started recognizing my work, not for fame, but for feeling. I even got invited to speak at a small art convention. The theme was Healing Through Creation. I remember standing on that stage, lights in my eyes, hundreds of faces waiting, and I said, "Pain changes people, but it doesn't have to define them. The people who break you don't get to decide who you become. You do. And sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then came applause. Soft at first, then strong like waves. It wasn't pride I felt. It was peace. The kind that stays. A few weeks later, I visited Grandpa Joe's grave. The wind was gentle. The sky wide endless. I placed a small sunflower beside his name and whispered, You were right, Grandpa. The numbers finally make sense. I smiled, closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt home. Not the kind you live in, the kind you carry inside. Now, when people ask me, how did you do it? How did you forgive them? I say, forgiveness isn't a gift for them. It's freedom for you. Because revenge doesn't always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like silence. Peace. Happiness they can't touch. That's what mine looks like. These days, I still get messages from strangers. People who say my story gave them courage to leave toxic families, jobs, or expectations. I always write back, you don't owe anyone your breakdown. You owe yourself your becoming. Last week, I found a photo on my phone, an old one. The park, my family, the caption still there. Family day without the drama. I almost deleted it, but then I smiled. Because now I understood. They weren't wrong. That was the last family day without drama. The day they lost the version of me that stayed quiet. The day I began again. I'm not angry anymore, just grateful. Because sometimes, the people who break you are the same ones who point you toward yourself. And if I could go back to that hospital bed, see myself lying there, exhausted, alone, I'd whisper one thing to her. They didn't show up, Ava. But you did, and that's enough. The machines, the IV, the silence, they used to symbolize failure. Now they remind me of a rebirth, because the day I collapsed wasn't the day I broke. It was the day I began.